Jeff, hey, I appreciate the time today. I always enjoy our chats, and I think it's because we see eye to eye on a lot of things. And you've got a really interesting story. People ask me all the time, what does it take to be successful? And I'd say my answer has probably changed in the last 20 years. But I found when we met that our answer was the same. So what has helped you become successful? If you were to sum it up, what has been the most important trait?
Yeah, well, for one, it's really good to do this and connect with you. And we've got a bunch of mutual friends that have said we should do this for a while. So it's fun to get to do it and get to chat. But to me, I feel like resiliency is one of the most important traits that you can have in business. Whether you own the business, whether you're an employee, whether you're a manager, whatever the case may be, I just feel like this idea of resiliency is just so critically important. And when I think about resiliency, like how do you really describe that and put some meaning to that? When you think about a buoy in the lake or the ocean, that buoy always goes back to the same spot. No matter how much water it takes on, it comes back to center and it stays in that same spot, whether it's calm, whether it's rocky. It may get blown off, 4 or 5 feet one direction, but it always comes back to where it's at. And so I think that's just a good visual for when I think of resiliency, what that looks like to me.
It's a fantastic example, and I completely agree with you. I used to think will and determination and hard work, don't get me wrong, those things are super, super important, but what are you going to do when you fail? What are you going to do when you're not certain about what the next move is? And, I can certainly tell you, we were talking about this earlier, I can definitely tell you that the trajectory from, starting out in anything to getting to what other people deem as success, not a straight line. It's not pretty. I think, we were talking about the iceberg illusion earlier. And I think that meme resonates with a lot of people because it basically shows the tip of the iceberg, the part you see, which looks really strong and almost impenetrable. But then underneath it is where, under the water is where you see the elements of perseverance. You see failure, you see sacrifice, disappointment, dedication. These are all the things that, in my mind, add up to that puzzle of resilience. Now, I'd love to hear your story, and then I'll share some of mine, because I think these are the stories that really resonate with folks. I know a lot of people, when I have been a sales leader historically, I always ask my team, especially when I'm trying to get them to change any type of behavior, are you 100% satisfied with your results the way they are today? Because if you're not, then what are you so afraid of gambling? What are you so afraid of risking by making a change? And kind of setting up that fertile ground for making change. Change is hard, but I know you've got a very compelling story around some steps that you've taken to get to where you are today, and I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I think for whatever reason, I had this crazy idea when I was 23. I thought, I think I can be my own State Farm agent, and I think I can be self-employed. And so I started kind of going down this path. And the guys, one of the guys that I used to work for, always told me, hey, whatever you do, become your own boss as early in life as you can. You can figure out the rest of it along the way, but start as quick as you can. And then he also said as a joke, the best time to start is when you have nothing, so that if you lose and it doesn't work out, you don't lose anything. And I didn't really understand that at the time. So anyway, I was hired to open my own office when I was 25. I opened my own office when I was 26. And I kind of joke with everyone that I ran out of money at 27. I was completely broke at 28. And at 29, I gave myself 6 months to see if this could work or not, if I actually was qualified to run a business. And if I wasn't, I was going to try to get out and do something else. And so now that I'm 34, I just, I'm very blessed, and I'm very thankful that God helped pull me through that, and gave me some gifts to see along the way to make that work. But just very thankful for where we're at now. But it certainly was different than when we started. And so when I'd go to a lot of these business conferences when I was struggling, I'd see these people that were 20 years into business, 30 years into business, and the train was just humming down the tracks. And it seemed like at that point, it's harder to get the train off the tracks than anything else. I think once you get enough positive momentum, that just carries you forward. But I was always curious, how did you get to that point? You know, when your lines of credit were tapped and your credit cards were maxed, how did you get out from underneath that? What did that look like? And that's this information that I think was just harder to find. But I feel like that resonates with a lot of people that are just starting out in a new career or a new business, and they're trying to make it happen. And so I think that's where that resiliency is just so incredibly important. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's kind of where I started and sort of where we're at now. And I wouldn't say that we're done or that we've reached a point that we're happy with, but certainly we've progressed a pretty long way from where we started with our office.
That's just it. You know, it's a vision, and then it's a series of decisions, and it's preparing yourself as best you can. But then when that inevitable setback comes, how are you going to react and respond? You know, I'm a big fan of Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. And the mantra of that, for me, what resonated for me most, that success comes after most people would have given up. You know, what do you do after most people would have thrown in the towel? And that's what determines success. I also, I love the rundown of Abraham Lincoln and his life. You know, he lost his job in 1832. He was defeated for the legislature the same year. He failed in business the following year. You know, he had death. You know, his love of his life died. Then he had a nervous breakdown. He was defeated for speaker, defeated for nomination for Congress, so on and so forth, until ultimately he was elected president, and he's regarded as one of the greatest presidents that our nation has ever had. And so I think the key element is in that there's a little story for all of us. I've had my own set and my own fair amount of extreme challenges. You know, I found myself looking for work unexpectedly several years ago. My relationship was not doing well. And, you know, it was one of those things where I kind of felt like I was starting all over. I had to reinvent myself. And often we have to reinvent ourselves numerous times in our lives and in our career. My career today looks nothing like it did back then. But did I learn a lot? Heck yeah. I learned that I could make it a certain amount on will and determination and on pure adrenaline and hard work. But where I needed to focus my efforts was building consensus, focusing on the wins of other people, making investments in relationships, understanding the game, understanding sales, and being a true student of it. Rather than thinking that I could do it all myself, really understanding the team elements. And when my career really took off was when I was in enterprise sales, when I understand that element, and I was looking for wins for everybody else, for customers, seeking real valuable relationships, and also for my colleagues, and developing a personal brand that could withstand any result. Now, don't get me wrong, I've had my fair share of really, really good years, but I've also had some setbacks. You know, I was actually, the last thing I'll say on this topic, and then I'd love to hear some additional thoughts from you on steps that you've taken and what you would tell people that are facing what they deem as a setback, because we're in an era right now where I think a lot of people are struggling. I've been diving in the new year to inspirational films and also leadership books. So I'm reading 11 Rings by Phil Jackson. I recently read a book by John Wooden. Today I started watching Invincible with Mark Wahlberg, and I think I'd seen it
Great
years
movie.
ago. But it's phenomenal. And the thing that hit me was that he always was carrying around his you know, the letter from his ex-wife that had left him, and just the feedback that she gave him when she did, that he was never going to amount to anything. I went back and I read an old appraisal that I'd gotten. It was the only bad appraisal I've ever gotten in my entire life, but I read it again. And it's like it resonated so much within me because, you know, for me, that was kind of the impetus for my last book, Salesman on Fire. I didn't agree with the feedback, but it lit a fire under me. You have a choice when you get these setbacks. You have a choice when you get feedback that you disagree with. You can either sit and sulk, which, don't get me wrong, we're all entitled if you want to sit and sulk and, you know, you want to sit in that moment for a minute. I get it. But you've got to make that decision to get back up, go back out there and do it double time. Really invest. If you want to be successful, really invest. And that's what I love most about your story, Jeff, is that you could have made a choice at any point in time to just stop and go do something else. for the sake of yourself, your family, anything, and you didn't. Why did you stay the course? And what would you tell people today that are facing similar circumstances?
I think, yeah, great question. I think there's just something to be said for youthful exuberance, if you will. Maybe you just don't know what you don't know. And I think if I was not 27 at the time, if I was 47, I think there might have been some more life experiences that said, man, you need to throw in the towel and go work for somebody and go figure out, how to provide for your family. But when you're 27, you maybe just don't have that same frame of reference, which I think is really important. That desire to keep going. And I think it's also important to realize that who I am is different than the circumstances that I'm in. The circumstances that I was in at the time were very not good. I wasn't running a great business. I wasn't making great hires. I wasn't training my employees well. I had a vision of what I wanted my office and my agency to be like and what I wanted our customer experience to be like. And I thought that was going to work, but I was struggling to get the team to be able to implement that vision with me. Well, I had never been in charge of anybody before, so the reason that I was failing, again, circumstances looked like it was really bad. It wasn't so much me that was the reason that I was failing. It was the fact that I was in a position that I'd never been in before. I had never had to hire anybody before. I'd never had to train anybody before. So I just assumed, hey, Carson, I hired you. I'm paying you X amount of dollars. You're going to just do exactly what I tell you to do. As it turns out, people are not wired like that. So that was a lesson that I had to learn, again, which caused some tough circumstances for myself. So I think that vision of just understanding that where I'm at now and the circumstances that I'm in are not who I am, And so I think that's one of the things that's really helpful. And I also think that there's a lot of really valuable lessons that come from losing, more so than when things are going well. And I'm a huge sports guy. I played sports in high school. Fortunate enough to play quarterback at Murray State on scholarship, and we always paid more attention in the video room after we lost than after we won. And I think that's so true in business. A guy that I used to work for had the saying that if it's wrong, don't do it long. And that is just so true while you're trying to figure things out, when you're trying to make it work. And so I think some of the encouragement that I would give to people that are in that, in the situation of this is not how I envisioned myself. When I went to college or I didn't, or when I signed up for this career that I'm in, I thought it would be different. Really figure out the reason as to why you're not where you're at. For me, it was an ineffective ability to get my team to understand the vision and the mission of what our office was going to be. And once I was able to figure some of those things out, once I was able to hire some better people and figure out what traits do I need of those to come alongside me, then we really took off and started going in a positive direction. And then the last thing I'll say to that is, being a sports fan, it took Michael Jordan a pretty long time to win his first championship. And most people don't really realize that. I think The Last Dance came out and did a good job of kind of explaining his story. But he lost a lot when he got to the Bulls. I think it was like 6 years before he won his first championship. And I just think that's so true in business. You sign up to do something, you figure out a new career, and most people are switching, to go from here to there or whatever too quickly before they get the chance to really set course and set sail on what they're trying to accomplish.
I always love when you can look at someone you admire, success, and you get to peel back the layers and understand what it truly took to get them there. I read a biography of Jordan last year. And the beauty of all of that is, like, the guy's not some, he doesn't purport to be some model citizen. And he was a selfish ball player when he started. I mean, he was a scoring champ, but they couldn't get past the Detroit Pistons. And the beauty in all of that is where it started to hum was when a coach like Phil Jackson came to him and said, look, we need you taking less shots and getting your team energized more, because the team was the weak spot at the time. They needed to really, truly gel and develop a team. He took a different role. He had to become something else. He became a student of the game to understand all of the parameters of it. I always love the phrase, you have to lose so you can win. I know that we when we last chatted, we talked a little bit about our paths because, Murray and Southeast Missouri State always played each other. You guys often came out on the winning end of that, but I digress. The beauty of learning from your losses is so key because, look, I've had a lot of things happen I've benefited from things in my life that I didn't deserve to benefit from, and I've also lost in situations that I didn't deserve to lose. And so the key element is you're not your circumstances. And I love that you highlighted that. But when you learn from your losses, what that means is taking the lessons that, I wound up in this situation because of X, Y, Z, right? So let me go forward with that knowledge. You've got to control your controllables. And I'm a big believer in odds and probabilities, and especially just being in sales. I apply very much a Moneyball type of approach. I know, what I can do, who I can reach out to. I can control the quality of my messaging. I can control the quantity of outreach, and I can control the consistency by which I execute. So figure out what you can control in your current situation. And typically what that is, it's the relationships that you can invest in. It's your personal growth and your learning that you invest in, and it's your mindset. What mindset are you bringing to the table? Do you go in, expecting to fail? Do you go in optimistic and leave it all on the field? Another sports analogy, but that's the key element. Is you need to be able to look back and realize before you accept failure, because sometimes you do have to accept failure. You have to look back and realize that you did everything that you could in order to be successful, in order to make a decision to change. Because the situation isn't necessarily, you don't necessarily have to persevere in everything that you do. Like, as in, if you have a job that is not good for your well-being and your health, maybe you need to look at something else. But you'll take some key learnings out of that. But we all have to pay our dues as well. Just because you're having a really tough time at a job doesn't mean you quit. You cut bait and you go somewhere else where you're going to basically have to reinvent yourself yet again and do the same thing all over again.
Right.
Sometimes there's benefit to sticking it through. I've had multiple times in my career where I didn't think I could do it. I didn't think I could make it out of training 20 years ago as a sales rep. I didn't think that I could be successful at Microsoft, surrounded by a lot of brilliant people when I had zero technical background. I was from telecommunications and advertising. But today I've been successful because of hard work, relationships, and leveraging all the resources at my disposal. Would love to get your thoughts, Jeff, especially as we're kind of wrapping up. Any other last thoughts? Anything else that you'd want to share with our audience today?
Yeah, I think, one of the things I'd share that made a really big difference for me is I think, I have access to 109 different products that I could sell. That's a lot. That's a big portfolio of stuff to sell. And when we really started to hone in on improving our business, improving our efficiencies, improving our customer experiences, when we really honed in on like 3 specific areas, and this is what we're going to be, and here's who we serve, and here's how we're going to serve them well. And I came across this article that I tell every salesperson that they should read like 4 times a year, print it out, make notes on. It's called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. It is an awesome piece, and it essentially says that any person in an organization can focus on one thing really well, and they can maybe do 2 things pretty well, but once you get to 3 or more, you're just being pulled in too many directions. So that's the first principle, is that you need to have a wildly important goal, and you can have no more than 2 of those. And so in our office, those goals became Chairman's Circle and Ambassador Club Level 3. Those were our 2 goals that we started to chase after, that dictated everything else that we did. And if you ask my team today, hey, what are your goals in your office? They'd be able to repeat those 2 things, because that's what we're chasing after, and that's what we're pursuing. And then the second concept is to focus on the leading indicators as opposed to the lag indicators. I think so many times in sales, people focus so much on we're still old school, so we write our sales up on a whiteboard in the office and color code stuff. And I think there's just something to said about getting a win, going back there, writing it on the board. I still love doing that. So anyway, but people focus too much on that board. They don't focus on the stuff that leads to you getting on that board. And I think you have to really understand that to be successful in sales, is that some people are going to tell you yes, and some people are going to tell you no. And a lot of those reasons you don't have much control over, if we're honest. But to your point on Moneyball, what you do have control over is how many times you pick up the phone, or how many appointments that you set, or how many calls that you make, or follow-ups that you do, or so forth. So this idea of focus on the leading indicators as opposed to the lag indicators. The leading indicators are how many calls you made per week. This is what your talk time was per week. Here's how many appointments that you set up or proposals that you sent out this week. This is where we need to be. So when you focus on those things, it's a lot less personal when things don't go well, because you're not focusing on, hey, Sally told you no, Jimmy told you no, Susie told you no. You know, you're not focusing on that. You're focusing on how many proposals did you give out? You know, in order to be successful, we need to give out X amount of proposals, you know, per week or per month. And I think when you can focus on that part of things, it takes the hurt out when somebody tells you no, because we say all the time that a yes or a no, that's the same in our office. You know, it's all part of the process of where we're trying to get to at the end of the month and at the end of the quarter. So the no's are just as important as the yeses, because we're following our process. We're getting out our bids. You know, and we'll call you back next year and maybe you'll change your mind then. So I just think that focusing on the process of selling is just so much more important than the where am I at for the month, you know?
Jeff, you hit on so many important elements there. I've known a lot of sales managers in my day, and I think a lot, probably for lack of their own training to be able to look at it in the same way that you just described, but a lot of them are very reactionary to results. They use the results to say, hey, you need to go out and sell more of this. But that's not helpful or constructive. It's
like coaching in Little League, you know, hey, throw strikes. Terrible coaching.
Exactly.
And that's what I did in the beginning. Hey, where are we at on our sales this week? What are your sales at? What are your sales at? It wasn't, are you doing the things that's going to generate sales? And that was the mistake I made when I was young, was I focused on the sales themselves, not the stuff that we know is sustainable over the course of a year, 3 years, 5 years. We didn't focus on those things. We just focused on, why aren't you writing anything on the board? It's the same as Little League. I coach varsity football at Francis Howell. It's the same as like, hey, make the tackle, you know, make the throw. Like, it's not coaching. It's not helpful. You know, they wanted to catch the ball.
And you nailed it. It's just, it's the disciplines, and it's the, you know, it's leveraging the data to be able to diagnose, to say, hey, this is what the data tells us. So, you know, we definitely have a gap in this metric or this KPI. You know, what could we address in our process that might change that? You know, are we bringing it up? Are we bringing it up passionately? You said you have 109 products. So if we're weak in a few widgets, you know, what does the process look like for how we're introducing that? And I think that's the key element. And socializing your goals. I love that you're picking some big goals to go after. You know, we just started a year. I challenge everybody to think about, in December, what do you want to look back and have achieved this year, have accomplished, be known for? Those are your goals. Like, that's how you pick that, because you've got an opportunity right now to pick what you want to be targeting. And then you need to craft the milestones. What's the impact that I'm going to need to have? What are the outcomes that I'm going to need to drive? What are those key you know, indicators? What are those things that I'm going to need to be doing, those hustle stats that I'm going to need to accumulate? You know, start a journal. Start tracking some of the achievements that you're making toward these things. It's not something that you have to spend a ton of time in. Sometimes I'll write like a bullet point in a week of just something that I did that I felt led me toward my goal. Develop a spreadsheet with KPIs. Like you were just saying around, you know, you've deemed I need to send out X number of proposals. Great. How am I tracking toward that? And what's great too is, Jeff, over time, you can start to look at, okay, what's the effectiveness rate of my proposals? If I know I'm sending 30, 50 a week or whatever that looks like, or a month, then I can say, okay, well, you know, in January, I had more response. You know, what did I do then? And then people can become more effective by really looking at that as the tail of the tape. It can show you and guide you in how you tweak your process. The last thing I was going to say is, I loved how you, first off, thanks for the article recommendation. I'm going to check that out, 4 Disciplines of Execution. But you brought back some great memories about the sales board. Sometimes those fundamental key things that bring people together, that are visual, where people get to celebrate, recognition is so important. And recognizing, calling out greatness. I encourage anybody, send somebody a note today that you appreciate, make a post about, you know, I know on LinkedIn, you can make posts giving people kudos. These things go such a long way in the investment of relationships. But I loved the sales board because every time, I remember when I started out as a sales rep, more and more people kept noticing that I was going up to the board over and over, and that stuff drove me.
And you get up and you walk past everybody, right? You walk, the whole place knows exactly where you're going. It's not to get coffee. You
better believe it.
That's exactly right. It's so
the coffee
awesome.
comes after, because coffee's for closers. But
that's exactly right.
It was amazing, because it was like it drove me so much just to be able to do that activity. And I think the last message in that is figure out what drives your people, and help drive them toward that. Do they want to develop command and mastery of their role? Do they want to get promoted? Do they want another role somewhere? Great, whatever it is, develop a roadmap with them of how they can get to those places, and just be 100% in it with them. Because if you invest in people to that degree, they will go far with you, not for you, but with you.
Right. Good stuff.
Very good. Well, hey, Jeff, thanks so much. This was amazing. We'll have to do this again sometime. You definitely got me fired up and ready to face the day and the week. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thanks.